I'm going to tell you 5 things about Japan that took me years to understand. Not the surface-level stuff you've probably already heard. Not wake up early or drink green tea. I mean the habits and ideas that actually reshape how you think, the ones that, once you understand them, make certain problems in your life suddenly look very different. I wish I'd known these at 20. I think you'll understand why by the end. Let's start. Habit number 1. Separate your identity from your results. In Japan, there is a concept called Ganbaru, which roughly translates as to persist or to do one's best. But what's interesting about Ganbaru is where the emphasis falls. In Japanese culture, the effort is honored independently of the outcome. A student who studies hard and fails the exam is respected. A craftsman who spends years perfecting a technique and still falls short of mastery is admired. The outcome matters, but it doesn't define the person. This is the opposite of how many of us have learned to relate to results. Most of us have merged our sense of self-worth with our output. When we succeed, we feel valuable. When we fail, we feel worthless. This merger is incredibly common and incredibly damaging because it means every setback becomes a verdict on who you are, not just a result in a specific domain. The Japanese habit of separating effort from outcome, of honoring the doing, independently of the result, creates a kind of psychological resilience that Western achievement culture rarely produces. What would it mean to evaluate yourself based on the quality of your effort, rather than the outcome? To ask, did I do my best, rather than did I win? This single shift doesn't make failure easier in the moment. But over time, it makes you genuinely more capable because you're not spending half your energy managing your ego. You can actually focus on getting better. Habit number 2, eat until you're 80% full. We've talked about Hara Hachi Bu on this channel in the context of Okinawan longevity, but I want to spend a moment on it here because I think it's one of the most practically powerful ideas on this list and also one of the most misunderstood. Hara Hachi Bu is a Confucian teaching practiced in Okinawa that means eat until you are 80% full, not until you feel satisfied in the way most modern eaters aim for. Just until you're no longer hungry. The reason this works is physiological. The stomach takes roughly 20 minutes to signal fullness to the brain. By the time you feel full, you've already eaten more than you needed. Stopping at 80% keeps you in alignment with what your body actually required. But the deeper habit isn't about calories. It's about the practice of moderation as a general orientation to life. Japanese culture has a concept of hodo hodo, just enough. Not the most, not the least, but the right amount. This applies to food, but also to work, to consumption, to ambition. The pursuit of more as a default strategy is something Japanese culture has always viewed with some skepticism. The question is always, how much do you actually need? In a world designed to make you want more food, more content, more stimulation, more stuff, the habit of stopping at enough is quietly radical and quietly powerful. Habit number 3. Treat your environment as an extension of your mind. In Japan, there is a deep cultural relationship between the state of one's physical environment and the state of one's inner life. This shows up in many ways. The practice of usoji, the great cleaning which happens at the end of each year when homes, workplaces, and public spaces are thoroughly cleaned before the new year begins. The idea is not just hygiene. It's the clearing of the old to make space for the new. A physical act with a psychological purpose. It shows up in the concept of seiri saiten seiso seiketsu shitsukeda 5S, methodology originally developed in Japanese manufacturing, which translates roughly as sort, straighten, shine, standardize, sustain. This system for maintaining an ordered physical environment has been adopted by companies and institutions around the world because it turns out that ordered environments produce better outcomes across virtually every domain. And it shows up in everyday Japanese life, where the relationship between cleanliness, order, and respect for the space, for the people who share it, for the work done within it, is taken seriously in a way that is genuinely different from most Western cultures. The psychological research backs this up. Cluttered, disordered environments increase stress hormones, reduce cognitive function, and make self-regulation harder. Clean, ordered environments do the opposite. The Japanese habit is to treat the environment not as a backdrop for life, but as a tool for living well. When you walk into a clean, well-ordered room, something in you settles. Something gets clearer. That's not an accident. It's cause and effect. Habit number 4. Find one thing and go deep. Japan is a culture of specialists in a way that Western culture increasingly is. Not the sushi chef who spends 50 years perfecting one dish. The gardener who tends the same garden for decades. The calligrapher who practices the same characters for a lifetime. This is the Shokunin spirit we've discussed on this channel, the commitment to mastery over breadth. In a world that rewards generalism, versatility, and the ability to pivot. Quickly, this might seem like outdated advice. But I think there's something important being lost in the race to stay current, stay flexible, and diversify everything. Depth produces things that breadth cannot. The ability to do one thing exceptionally well, to know a domain so thoroughly, that your intuition is reliable, that you can sense problems before they arise, that you can produce work that only comes from genuine mastery. This is becoming increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. You don't need to commit to one thing for 50 years. But the Japanese habit of going deeper rather than broader, of resisting the constant pull toward novelty, and choosing instead to stay with something long enough to actually understand. It produces a kind of capability and a kind of satisfaction that serial generalism never quite delivers. What is the one thing in your life right now that is worth going deeper on? Habit number 5. Practice Ukeireru, acceptance. Ukeireru is a Japanese word that means something close to receive or to accept. But in its deeper cultural usage, it describes an attitude toward life's difficulties that is quite different from the Western model of problem solving. When something painful happens, a loss, a setback, a change you didn't want, the Western default is to mobilize, to problem solve, to fix, to find the lesson, apply the learning, and move forward as quickly as possible. Ukeireru asks something different. It asks, can you receive this? Can you let this be what it is, without immediately trying to change it or make it mean something or use it for your personal growth? There's a famous Japanese aesthetic principle that is related to this: shikata, ganai. It cannot be helped, not as resignation, not as defeat, but as a clear-eyed acknowledgement that some things are what they are. The typhoon cannot be argued with. The loss cannot be undone. The season will change when it changes. This acceptance, when it's genuine, when it's not repression but actual receiving, creates a kind of peace that the relentless problem-solving mode cannot. Because the relentless problem-solving mode treats everything as a project. And some things are not projects. Some things are just life. The habit of Ukeireru doesn't mean being passive. It means knowing the difference between what can be changed and what cannot, and spending your energy accordingly. These 5 habits are not quick fixes. They're orientations, ways of being in relationship with yourself, your work, your environment, and the parts of life you can't control. They took Japan centuries to develop. They'll take you more than a week to absorb, but they're worth the time. Because they don't just make you more productive or more successful. They make you more at home in your own life. And that, it turns out, is the harder and more important thing to learn. I want to add something before I finish, because I think it's important. These 5 habits share something underneath them that's easy to miss when you look at them individually. They're all in different ways about reducing the noise. The noise of ego in habit. 1, the constant evaluation of whether you're winning or losing. The noise of overconsumption in habit 2. The noise of disorder in habit 3. The noise of distraction in habit 4. The noise of resistance in habit 5. Japan, at its best, is a culture that has thought carefully about what kind of noise is worth tolerating and what kind simply gets in the way. Not all noise, of course. Japanese culture has plenty of its own complications and contradictions. But in these particular areas, it has developed practices that, tested over centuries, seem to produce something worth paying attention to. Quieter minds, steadier lives. A different relationship with time, with work, with the inevitable losses that every life contains. You don't have to move to Japan to access any of this. You just have to be willing to look at how you're living now with honest eyes and ask, what noise can I reduce? The answer will be different for everyone, but the question is worth sitting with. That's the invitation.